I'm just gonna go straight into it.
Mm-hmm.
This is the this is the first movie that made me not regret doing this podcast. This is,
Well, I'm glad we're getting
we've
this out
had
in the
some good
open.
movies, we've had some not so good movies, but this is the first one where I'm like, okay, this podcast was worth it. Because if I
Mm.
didn't, it would have taken me a long time to get to this. The movie, for those curious, is The Life and Death of Colonel Blimp, directed by two directors. I always forget
Kind
their
of.
names. Hold
Michael
on.
Powell and Emmerich Pressburger. So Michael
Yes.
Powell is a British citizen man. Emmerich
Mhm.
Pressburger is a Hungarian national.
Yep.
And from what I understand, I could be wrong, Michael Powell did most, not all, of the directing, and Emmerich Pressburger did most, but not all of the writing. So there was a little division of
Okay.
labor.
So
But
they're kind
they,
of like William Friedkin and William Peter Blatty.
yeah. And I think
Okay.
Emmerich Pressburger did the producing. I don't know. They had, it's this weird thing where it's just like this creative unit that
Yeah.
they did a bunch of different roles and they just awarded both of themselves
That's fine.
equal creative status as directors.
Yeah. I
Anyway, Life and Death of Colonel Blimp is a 1943 movie. That's a guess, completely
yeah,
on
it
my part.
is. I'm looking
Okay,
at it
cool.
right now.
Uh, about a British army man from his early young days as a young whippersnapper in the Boer War and through the early 20th 20th century shenanigans in Europe into World War One and then World War Two and then into his old age where he has settled into his ways and now there are new younger whippersnappers who are uh, doing all the shenanigans. So it's a you get a
It is.
full layer cake of history with this film.
Yeah.
Ought to be ashamed of yourselves. Yelling and screaming like some damned foreigner. Tonight's state of things. Officers and men losing their lives in South Africa, while young officers are roaring about public places like drunkards. Perhaps you are drunk, huh? What's it?
VC, sir.
Where'd you get it?
South Africa, Jordan Sadi.
Your candy. Sugar candy.
Yes, sir.
Huh. Good show, candy.
So how
It
did you
is a
feel about
very
the movie?
personal epic. I love this so much. So everything about this, I loved it so much. Uh, it's one of those movies that it's there. It's not so much a plot as it is an examination of one person, uh, and that one person would be Colonel Blimp. And the first thing that blows my mind about this is the makeup, because I had no idea. I knew nothing about this movie. I assumed that if it was the life and death, it was going to be a very wide-reaching movie going throughout history.
Mm.
But I literally, for about the first 10 or 20 minutes, I thought they were two completely different people playing Colonel Blimp, and I didn't realize until after the movie that Deborah Kerr played three different people.
I didn't realize that my first viewing either.
Because
So-
they're so, she plays all three of these characters so differently, not just in her voice, but in her mannerisms and her facial alignment. It's just, it is crazy how they managed to convey so much time in this movie.
Yeah. So my first viewing, this is another classic example of Jacob has seen a movie before and Chandler hasn't.
Yeah.
I've watched it twice before. First time it was, oh, this is cool. Fun movie. And then the second time I really, really started vibing with it. And it is a wonderfully wholesome movie to watch.
Surprisingly, yeah.
And it's a long movie, but it's one of those that justifies its runtime.
Yeah.
And there is actually, on your note of makeup, there is actually a body double in the
Okay.
So the opening, the sauna room scene.
Oh, is it when the camera is behind Colonel Blimp in the pool?
Yeah, so the
Okay.
close-up
'Cause he looks
shots
fatter there.
close-up shots are the actor, and then the anything from behind
Yeah.
or wider is a body double,
Yeah.
and that's simply just for the weight purposes, because they
Yeah.
wanted him to be heavier. And it's also because of that amazing shot that takes you from the present back to the past, where they're
Yeah.
fighting in the pool, and then it glides over the pool, and it's this one continuous shot that theoretically Colonel Blimp as an old man is in, and then the young man emerges from the pool at the other end
Yep.
and
It
seamlessly
is the
transitions you.
Yep. It is the perfect in between. I felt like this was the perfect mixture of Citizen Kane and Lawrence of Arabia. Because you get a lot of that passage of time, but instead of it being like an outsider's look into this person, it's the actual person itself. There's a lot of wartime romance, a lot of country spanning conflict. You get a very deep dive into a single person over the course of his life. But a lot of the presentation was very Kane-esque. But hold on, when did Citizen Kane come out?
1940.
So 2 years before this.
Okay, well, you didn't let me finish with my guess, although I would have gotten it wrong probably.
Yeah, 41. But yeah, I've always been fascinated by this idea when I'm around, out and about, getting a coffee, getting some gas, walking around. I constantly people watch, and I look at people and I just think to myself, oh, that's just a person I see today. But if I really got to know this person, I would understand that there was years and years of life lived by this person that somehow brought them to me right in front of me right now. And I feel like this is the perfect kind of movie that just sort of explores that idea.
It was one of the critics, I don't know, maybe it was Roger Ebert or someone said of Colonel Blimp, to know Colonel Blimp is to love Colonel Blimp.
Yep.
And you love him by the end.
Well, because at the beginning, it's sort of like
he's a cartoon character.
Yeah, this entire movie is just it's like a PSA for you to stop saying "Okay, Boomer."
I was literally just about to say this is the antithesis of "Okay, Boomer." The argument. It is an entire thesis statement on stop saying "Okay, Boomer."
I think I put that in my Letterboxd review that it was just a boomer epic, but I mean that in the nicest way possible. Because I love this sort of idea that Colonel Blimp is like this sort of bastion for the old ways. Because World War One in particular was a huge transition period. I'm super into World War One. I've talked about this before. But it was a super transitionary period where we have the pre-World War One combat where it's just rows and rows of soldiers lining up against each other and fighting, and then the post World War One combat where it just became about how do we have to fight the dirtiest way possible to win. We have to go as low and as deadly and as malicious as we can because we don't need to just beat the enemy, we need to crush the enemy. And that was a sentiment that was kind of beginning around World War One, and we saw how bad we could be towards the end of World War One. But it was an idea that wasn't really fully seen until World War II and the Nazis and Stalin and occupation and invasion and stuff like that. But what I love so much is that Colonel Blimp, even when he's living through the horrors of World War One, sort of turns a blind eye to this slowly devolving way of combat. And you can see it when his fellow soldier that turns out to be his like butler or whatever, as soon as Colonel Blimp leaves from trying to interrogate the prisoners, you kind of see that the other guy is about to employ some less ethical tactics. Mm-hmm. And I just love that we get to see just how blind he is at the same time being super experienced and knowledgeable.
Yeah, so obviously the main focus of this film is Clive Candy, played by Roger Livesey. Great performance. Mm-hmm. I don't really know Roger Livesey from anything else, which is a shame.
You don't need to though.
Yeah, it because it was originally going to be played by that Shakespeare actor, the big one. What's his name?
Charlton Heston.
No. English actor. I'm looking it up. This is gonna kill me. God. Well, I'll just keep looking it up until I find it. But the part was originally going to go to someone else, and then it went to Roger Livesey because the war called the other guy away, and we got Roger Livesey, which was great because I think the fact that you don't really know him as an actor from anything else
Uh-huh.
is helps to kind of create this kind of singular vision in your mind of the character
Yeah.
of Clive Candy. He is just
You don't bring any outside knowledge of the actor. This person is as new to you as it is to the movie.
right. I think this is a great example of when casting someone who isn't a huge star. I don't know
Yeah.
if this is the case for back then. I don't think he was as big of a star as other people were.
Yeah.
But I think the real kind of it's obviously the movie is Clive Candy's story, but I think the heart of the film and some of the most interesting parts of the film is, of course, his friend Theo Kretschmar Schuldorf
Yeah.
or something, played by
Mhm.
the amazing actor Anton Walbrook. Have you ever seen Anton Walbrook in another movie?
I have not.
Because I have. He's in The Red Shoes, and that is one hell of a
That's
performance.
another
there.
Pressburger movie, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's great. I've never seen a performance by, granted, I've only seen two, this and Red Shoes, but he is fantastic in both. And
Well, I think one of the best scenes in the movie is his sort of monologue when he's trying to flee Germany and into England.
I think my two favorite parts of the film, ironically, have nothing to do with Clive Candy. It's
Yeah.
Theo's monologue to the immigration processing officer about how he's homesick for a country that he's never lived in, and this kind of incredible sadness you feel for this German man who's been forced to flee Germany, and it's an excellent exercise in empathy and just wow. It's one of the best monologues in cinema history.
It is.
And
you know, obviously a lot of
mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
What's up?
No, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Okay.
I was gonna say a lot of what that has to do. That Theo scene obviously was a lot of the things that it was an Emmerich Pressburger because he is from where, Austria,
Hungary,
yes. He was also a sort of political refugee, and apparently a lot of what he experienced was put into that scene in particular.
Yeah, and then I think the other poignant moment in the film is, of course, when Clive Candy's broadcast doesn't go through and he's feeling down, and then Theo gives him this little, it's not really a monologue, it's more of just a little speech about how the rules of the game have changed, how I think the line is, if you let them defeat you just because you are too honorable or something to hit back the same way they hit at you. I don't know what it is, but it's talking about like the rules of the war and how times have moved on from Clive Candy, and it's just so eloquently stated and just kind of summing up the monstrosity of the problem faced with England with the Nazis, and how this older generation just was not equipped in any way to deal with it, and not through any fault of their own. It's just history progressing to the point where the rules have changed. And I'm sure it's happened with the boomers now, and it's going to happen with us. And I'm very curious to see what the world will look like when we are old men, and what rules will have changed then.
Yeah, you know, it's a movie that's very introspective, and I think a huge part of why I think this is one of the more interesting choices that I feel like is implored constantly throughout this movie is that we never see the actions that change people. We move from different points. It's kind of the stuff that we're not shown as opposed to the stuff that we are shown. Like the duel, for example. We don't really need to see the duel because we understand that it's just sort of it's just another transitionary point. And I love that I love the way that this movie bounces in between different stages in Colonel Blimp's life, where we can assume so much just by his slowly aging persona. He's a little like when we go from the duel to him in the middle of World War I, you can see not only through the makeup but just through his performance, just how he's a little more tired, a little more wise, a little more wary of the world, and just just one of the another reasons why the that transition shot between old Clive and young Clive is just so wonderful, because we just shed all of these years of wisdom and experience, and then we just get right back to the youthful center that just gets built up of he just must he grows a mustache and he loses his hair and he gets a gut, and it's a nice little reminder that we're all headed for that in one way or another.
It's a war movie about the parts. It's a war movie without any action. It's a war movie that's about the blank space between the wars, the years, what happens to people between wars, like World War One, World War Two, and all that. And it's not really filmed particularly extraordinarily, if that makes sense. Like by today's standards,
No, it's very simple. It's a lot of sound stages, a lot of it's at some points I would even say cheesy stages.
Yeah, it feels like a TV film at some points.
Yeah, like when when Clive and his subordinate are in the trenches of World War I. It's so obviously a sound stage. You can tell that just the way he's looking off camera, you can tell that he's just looking at an entire crew behind the camera. But there's something about that that just feels right for this kind of movie.
It's almost like that we're looking at it now, that it's almost like Clive Candy looking back on his own past, where it's kind of simple. The filmmaking itself is hearkening back to a simpler age.
Yeah.
And that in and of itself makes the movie age really well, because the visual presentation is almost mirroring the expression of, Clive Candy being
he's reminiscing. He's fondly looking back. To him, his whole life was, I mean, to an extent, everybody lives their life thinking they're the stars of their own show, their own theater performance. So it makes sense. And obviously, there's a lot to do with technical limitations. But I noticed it, but it never took me out of it.
Well,
If
the
anything,
film
it
is
made
beautiful.
me like it more.
It's filmed on film, Technicolor, color is great. It's really well shot and acted and blocked, and
just the scene where he's trying to get that one German guy's attention, where they're all sitting in that elegant dining hall listening to the big band music, and Clive Candy is trying to tell them to play a certain song that they used to play when they held their prisoners, and just that whole beautifully constructed, it's almost like a silent film comedy in that regard.
It's a good example of
set pieces.
Yeah, that scene in particular is a good example of just a scene in general of like, your character has a goal. How do you get them to achieve a goal using not just their words, and visually, showing this tug of war between the two sides of the scene. Great scene to just look at it in terms of like screenwriting and how to make a scene.
Because a lot of the plot there's not necessarily an overarching goal. It's just little scenes that bring you into more little scenes that all add up by the end. That just a complete portrait of a guy, warts and all.
And it's also a portrait of a friendship between him and Theo.
Oh, it's so pure.
It's very pure, and like when he says, as their relationship develops, and as when Theo asks him, "Can I marry what's her name?"
Hold on.
Played
she
by
has
Deborah
3
Kerr.
names.
Yeah.
Edith.
Can I marry Edith?
Is it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, one of them. And you think it's, Clive is in love with her and all that, but not really. And they all just, they hug, and it's, I'm so happy for you. And
very much.
Very much. Over time, over the film, you feel like you're developing this friendship with these two people. So the phrase, Theo in the beginning, as a German, can't speak any English, and all he knows is very much. And then over the course of the film, as he says very much again in more of a kind of tongue-in-cheek way, now that he knows English, it's heartwarming. And you're like, oh my goodness, they're friends. I feel it. I don't just see
Yeah.
it. They're not just telling me they're friends. I feel it too.
Yeah. Just a wonderful, intimate epic. It's very layered. It's very well acted. Very well written. It's I'd say a perfect movie.
I think it's got a little some funky pacing. I like to say that about a lot of movies that are
You
pretty
do.
good.
Yeah.
But I can't hold that against it. So
But by the end, what it manages to do, I overlook any flaws that it might have. I
Yeah.
love these kinds of movies, these character driven movies, and it's hard to make a character driven epic, especially one that is as devoid of action as this is. But even though it's devoid of action, it's never boring.
Mhm.
There's so many great lines in this movie that it makes you excited just to see two people sit in a room and talk.
Yep.
It's also coincidentally one of the most British things I've ever seen in my
Oh
life.
my God, Chandler! How could I forget to say? Listen, I grew up watching British television. My on my mother's side, my family is from the UK. My mom studied in Oxford, so I have been seeped in British culture, right?
Yeah.
Growing up, I've literally watched British TV shows that no one has ever fucking heard of in this country. And I've watched Agatha Christie. We've talked about that before. That's
Yep,
probably
big
one of the
fan.
most British things I've ever seen. But
A lot of
this
Perot,
just
but that's not
like
English.
takes the cake by a mile in terms of just full on Britishness, from colonialism to stiff upper lip to everything. It's wow.
It's the politeness with a little edge. It's the teeth that are never horrible but never great. It
The
is
teeth.
the complete blindness to how awful their imperialism is. It's wonderful.
Yeah. Ugh.
Uh,
This is a gem. This is like a hidden gem from the 40s that I think more people need to watch.
Yeah, I'm surprised how many people that I talked to haven't heard of this or watched it. Because I know a lot of people are familiar with the Red Shoes. That appears to be their big stamp on cinema history. But I mean, I'm sure we'll get to that at some point. But
Is it on this list? I feel like that's
It
another
has
one
to
that
be. It has to be.
you say that, and
Let me see what else they
I know there are a few glaring omissions.
Black Narcissus, that was one I've wanted to watch for a while. Oh, I didn't know they did Peeping Tom.
Have you seen The Matter of Life and Death?
I have not, no.
You should. I don't know. It's not on this page. And this is
the directors.
This is the first page, so not the
no.
end of the list. This is the 80 to 1.
Okay.
Is it? It's gotta be. I don't see it. We need to watch it anyway.
Well, I'll watch it. They got a criterion that looks very nice.
It is very nice.
So moving on to the big question, I think this will be simple to answer. Does this deserve to be on the list?
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't think I have said
I don't have
yes
a single reason
more
to believe that it's not.
Yeah, I've never said yes to any movie on this list with more confidence.
Same.
Other movies deserve to be on the BFI list, but I'm not 100% confident. They're not fully justifying of their appearance.
Again, we're not that far into this whole venture, but if anything, I'm more surprised that it's this far down.
Yeah.
Not only because it is so great, but it is so quintessentially British.
Yeah. For me so far, I don't know if you've been looking at because I know you do, and I keep a running track on Letterboxd, a list of these movies ranked. And
yeah, I do.
This, Les Samurai, and Earrings of Madame De are like the three that I am pretty confident are just great movies on their own merits, regardless of history. I would say
this, Madame De, and L'Argent are the ones. Yeah.
I might need another watch of L'Argent.
Yeah.
It's a good movie.
Well, this is going straight to the top regardless.
No. I think I still like maybe Les Samurai more. But this is
Really? Wow.
I don't know. There's something about just that cool melancholy stoicism of that film that
okay.
I don't know.
Well, this is
honestly it's a tie. It's a tie for first place between this and Les Samurai. And Earrings of Madame De in a close third.
this is on a completely new level for me. This is on its own tier.
I do think it's on a new tier. In general, beyond my opinion, this is the best thing we've watched so far.
Yes. It's gonna, I feel like it's gonna take a while for me to get something that's gonna be this good.
Well,
but
don't say that. You don't know what's coming up.
Yeah, that's true.